Hello, and welcome to another edition of Coffee Talk with immigration attorney Brian D. Lerner. Glad you could make it. This particular video is directed to the people of Australia, or if you know somebody from Australia, what can be done to allow them to come in. So first I have to say good day, mate. Did I say that right? Um, Let me tell you that there are several different ways in which to be able to come in to Australia from Australia, and there are also different ways which, because you're from Australia, it makes it more difficult. So, for example, if you want to try claiming asylum from Australia, that's not going to work. I have never heard of a case nor ever seen a case of somebody from Australia claiming asylum. However, there are a lot of good business people in Australia. Those who have their own businesses, those who have money to invest, those who have bachelor's and master's degrees. This particular video is really directed toward you, okay? And I thought that I would direct this specifically to Australia because there's a lot of questions as to what type of visas they qualify for. A lot of times people think that the only way, excuse me, the only way that you get into the United States is if you have a family member, and that is just not true. There are several very good business ways in which to come into the U.S. And while I could go on for the next 3 hours with different variations of this and different types of business visas, I want to concentrate on just a few to give you a better idea of how to do it. Now, first of all, let's say that you have your own business in Australia, whatever it is. Okay, I mean, you could be selling widgets. Yeah, you could have your own restaurant, you could have your own vacation company, whatever it is. Let's say that you have your own company. Now, it has to be running for at least a year. So, if you've only just started it a few months ago, keep listening. But, when this particular visa can be filed will be a little bit into the future. You also need to either have specialized knowledge, okay, with the particular company, or you basically need to be running it. I can tell you that the majority of people from Australia that come into the U.S. on this type of visa run their own company. Now, this is called an L1, okay? And an L1 is an intercompany transferee visa. Now, what does that mean? That means that basically you have a company in Australia and you're going to open up a branch office here in the U.S. Now, the next question I always get is how much money is needed to invest? And my answer is always the same. It depends. Okay. With an L1, the amount of money that is invested is actually far less than the next visa I'm going to talk about. However, with the L1, you have to keep the business open in Australia when you come to the U.S. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't shut down the corporation and make sure nobody walks in the door. This means that the company in Australia still does business even though you're coming to the U.S. Okay, and so you have to have somebody who you trust, who you're going to designate basically to run the company. Now, the next question usually that I get is, does the company in the U.S. have to do the same thing that the company is doing in Australia? And the answer is no. It doesn't have to. I mean, if you want, you can buy a Kentucky Fried Chicken here. But you have to explain, and by you I mean my firm, we have to explain why you want to diversify basically into another different type of business. Now, one thing that's very important, critical, is the ownership. Okay, if you own 100% of the company in Australia, you're going to own 100% of the company here. Or the company in Australia is going to own the company here as a subsidiary. So let's say you and 12 other people own the company in Australia. The easiest way to show the similar ownership requirements is really a subsidiary ownership relation, rather than having a separate ownership here, essentially showing the same people own in both places. So, while that is an issue, if done properly, you can get over it. Now, I have noticed that most of my clients from Australia seem to know what they want to do when they come here to the U.S., and they have in mind what they want to do, and that's fine. Many times they'll say, "Well, what if we want to do this, but later we want to do that?" And I go, "It's fine. We're going to create a business plan, a 5-year business plan that's going to show all kinds of stuff in regards to graphs and charts and numbers, and it's going to show how successful the business is going to be, type thing. But what we'll do is we'll put how it will expand into whatever it is you want. So let's say that you have a hairstyling company, okay, whatever it is, and you know that it's going to be too expensive initially to start the hairstyling company in the US, or you simply don't know where you're going to buy one. So this is a case that I did recently. You come in and you have your own little office where you contract your services out to various salons, okay? And then they pay you as an independent contractor. And you work there for a while, and as you're working at these different places, these different salons, you're starting to learn the area and get a feel for where you really want to buy a salon. And then eventually you buy a salon, and then maybe you still work for other people on the side, maybe you don't, maybe you do your salon full time. Either way, that was all anticipated in the original business plan, so it's fine. Okay, you're not violating your status, you're not working without authorization, none of that. Okay, now let me just tell you, and I'm not going to go too much into this, but when you come on an L1, once everything is successful and you have a year and a half behind you and so forth, assuming you are of the managerial / executive type, you can then apply for what's called the multinational manager visa, and this is for the green card. And I'm telling you, next to marrying a U.S. citizen, and sometimes even better than that, is the multinational manager visa for the green card. It is a first preference employment-based petition that the U.S. likes. They want you to come in. I'm not saying it's easy to prepare. By no means is it easy to prepare, but it does allow you to ultimately get residency with using the L1 as a stepping stone. Okay, so that's the first type of visa. Now, the second type, which is equally, if not more popular these days, is called the E2. Okay, now the Australia has a treaty with the United States that essentially allows people to come in and open their own business and so forth, and this is an E2. Now, this is similar to an L1, except there's actually 3 major differences. Okay, one, you don't have to have a company in Australia when you invest in the U.S., and even if you do, you can close it up if you want, if you're going to do the E2. Secondly, the amount of money to invest in the business in the U.S., this needs to be much higher. Okay, I mean, we're looking around $70,000, and that's 70,000 U.S. dollars. I don't want you to confuse and think that you invest 70,000 Australian dollars and then everything's okay. No, it has to be converted, and the amounts need to be about that. Now, the mark I usually use as well is 100,000. I mean, 70,000 is more or less the minimum, but you can go up from there. And again, it depends on the fair market value. Theoretically, you can buy a restaurant and say you paid $110,000 for it, except that's not realistic for a typical restaurant, and it's probably not going to fly. So with the E2, you have to have that money, and it needs to be money you legally received. A lot of people say, well, what if my mom gives it to me, or what if my, dad bequeaths it to me, or whatever? That's fine. Okay, as long as it is legally obtained by you, you come in the U.S. and you have to own 51%, and this is under the E2, you have to own at least 51% of the company here in the US. So you can buy one that's already in operation, or you can start brand new. Now, if you buy one that's in operation, you want to make sure to contact me before the sale goes through, because we need a lot of documents from the current seller, and if they know they're going to get you to buy the company, they're more than willing to give all these documents. But the moment the sale goes through, all of a sudden they disappear, their documents can no longer be found, and you can forget trying to get any prior documents. It doesn't mean that still can't be put through, but why make it harder on yourself? So be sure to contact me prior to the final sale. Now, if you're going to do a new company, again, the E2, what my company puts together is the business plan, the incorporation, and the incorporation is not just, going to, corporationsrus.com and doing a quick articles of incorporation. There's all kinds of documents that are needed for immigration to make sure that everything is copacetic for the E2 visa. There's one thing doing what you would do for business. There's another thing doing what you would do for immigration. And you kind of want to make the two mix. So that's essentially how we work it. Now, the E2 is usually valid for a couple years at a time, but as long as you would follow what I would tell you, you can renew it over and over and over for the rest of your life if you want, or you can later apply for some type of residency, which, by the way, the multinational manager visa, if you happen to have a company already in Australia and it's running, there's nothing stopping you from coming on an E2 and then doing the multinational manager, as long as the actual company still resides in Australia. But if you don't, there's other ways as well. Okay, so I'll get to those in a few minutes. But for the E2, another nice advantage is we don't need prior U.S. approval. Okay, which means that we prepare the whole petition, we send it to the U.S. consulate in Australia straight away. We don't have to send anything here first. With the L1, we do have to send it to USCIS. We have to wait for the approval. They wire it to the U.S. consulate, then we go from there. And you may or may not want to do premium processing, but with the E2, that's not an issue. We send it straight there. What happens is they pre-review it. They then let me know when they're ready for the interview, and then of course, after you have reviewed the package that my firm has done from cover to cover, you go into the interview, and assuming everything is fine, you'd be issued the E2 visa. Now, another issue is the derivatives. Okay, the derivatives are dependents of yours, and that would be your spouse and unmarried children under 21. It is not your sister or brother. It is not your parents, not your friends. Okay, and it's not your children over 21. Only unmarried children under 21 and spouses. And what happens is they will get derivative visas. So if you're coming on the E2, they'll get the E2. It's actually the same nomenclature, but they'll get the E2, and the spouse can work anywhere the spouse wants, no restrictions. And the children, as long as they're not going to college, can go to any school they want, no restrictions. That's the same for the L1 or the E2, so those have very nice dependent benefits. Now, there's another type of visa called the E3, okay, and this is not quite so much the entrepreneurial type visas as is the E2 and L1, but it is specific to Australia, and it's similar to the H-1B, okay. So basically, if you have a college degree, usually a bachelor's, sometimes a master's or higher, and you have a company in the U.S. that wants to petition you for the use of that degree, and if there are visas available under the E3 category, then you can be petitioned and come in on that basis. Now, that means that they have to relate. So, for example, if you have an engineering undergraduate degree, you're not going to get an offer as an accountant, okay? If you have an accounting degree, you're not going to get an offer as an engineer, okay, or as a cashier. There's all kinds of stuff that has to be prepared in order to make sure that is done properly. But the E3 is certainly doable if you happen to have a sponsor. Now, I have found in the years I've been doing this that more people are interested in the E2 and the L1s because uh, there's an entrepreneurial spirit, it seems, with a lot of people in Australia, and they want to come here and start their own helicopter company or whatever it is that they're going to do in order to meet their particular dreams. Now, for those people who happen to have quite a bit more of investment money, and we're talking 500,000 US to a million US, you can actually apply right away for the green card. So, for example, if you have 500,000, you can apply for what's called the EB5, and that's finding a regional center, which is a pre-designated place where basically you're going to invest with them, and they're going to use your money to continue their building. So, for example, there might be a huge apartment complex or luxury condos, and they're using all EB5 investment monies in order to get it. Um, that can certainly work for you, but you have to do due diligence in order to invest in the proper regional center. People will always say, "Well, what regional center do you recommend?" And I neither can nor do recommend a regional center because it is your business decision you have to do. However, I can put you in touch with whom you need to talk with about various regional centers. If you say, you want to come to the LA area or the Florida area, I can give you the currently approved regional centers, and you can, do your due diligence. I can also give you information on a company that will give you a very detailed report for a reasonable cost on every single number that you would ever want in order to make your business analysis. Additionally, if you happen to have the million to invest, you can start your own company. It's similar to the E2, except it takes quite a bit more money and there's other requirements as well. But if you have children that are going to age out and you don't have time to stay for year after year on an E2 and you want to make sure your kids jump on your coattails to get the green card, then the EB5 might be the way to just jump right in initially in order to try to benefit from this. Now, for those people who have only the 500,000, but you want to still invest in your own company and not a pre-designated regional center, that can be done, but it has to be in a rural area, and that basically means towns with less than 20,000 people, which can be found. I mean, those are the ones that have small towns, cows roaming around, pastures, things like that, or a targeted area, which is either a very low income area or has 1.5 times the unemployment rate of the national average. And there's all kinds of ways of having to show that. So again, this would be the EB5 investment visas through either the regional center or the direct investment. So again, I could go on and on with different ones, but these are the most popular. And so let me just recap. We went over the L1. That's when you have a company in the U.S. and you buy a company here. We went over the E2. That's when you do a direct investment to a company that you want to start over here. Then we talked a little bit about the multinational manager visa for the green card, talked a little bit about the EB5 regional center and EB5 direct investment. We talked about the E3, which is the specialized knowledge type visa where you have a sponsor. And so as you can see, there's all different kinds of alphabet games that we play here to get you in. So if you like the video, click like. You can subscribe. I do usually videos once a week. And then if you'd like a consultation, I do give free consultations. And because of modern technology, of course, I can give consultations anywhere on the planet without any problem. So you just have to sign up the time and dates that are listed on the site, and then we go from there. Okay, more on the coming videos.